Good evening, Chairman Mr. B.K. Chaturvedi, our distinguished speaker, Mr. K.V. Kamath, Professor Roha, trustees of Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, and members of audience participating from different locations. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all this evening on behalf of Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust. Some of you must be familiar with late Mr. Lovraj Kumar. Some of you may not be. Lovraj Kumar was born in 1926 in an illustrious family. He studied at Doon School, then at Allahabad University, and then at Oxford. After a short spell with Burmah Shell, he joined Government of India. He was recognized for his talent and got several senior positions in Government of India. He was instrumental in development of hydrocarbon and petrochemical industries in India. He supported indigenous R&D and facilitated involvement of scientific community with industry. His opinion had strong influence in government's decision-making. Following his untimely demise in 1994, members of Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers Northern Regional Center promoted this trust in his memory. The initiative got good support from industry. The trust has taken up several activities like organizing a memorial lecture once in a year, organizing workshops on technical subjects, research conclaves, etc. Memorial lectures have been delivered by eminent persons in the past, like Professor M.G.K. Menon, Dr. Abid Hussain, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Mr. Soli Sorabji, Mr. Sam Pitroda, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, etc. Last year it was delivered by scientist Padma Bhushan, Professor M.M. Sharma. Trust is supported by trustees who have come from different backgrounds and are recognized for their achievements in respective fields. Persons of eminence have provided leadership to the trust, like Mr. Dharamveera, Mr. P.K. Dave, Dr. Abid Hussain, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, and now Mr. B.K. Chaturvedi. Mr. Chaturvedi occupied various important positions in Government of India, including that of Cabinet Secretary. We are thankful to him for accepting chairmanship of the trust and guiding its activities. Over the years, activities of the trust have got good recognition and has become a good platform for sharing knowledge and interaction amongst the policymakers, scientific community, and industry. Today we have an exemplary person, Mr. K.V. Kamath, to deliver the Lovraj Kumar Memorial Lecture. Mr. Kamath graduated in mechanical engineering, then studied management at IIM, Ahmedabad, and made a career in the banking industry. For last 1 year, economy of not only India, but whole world has suffered due to the pandemic. The world is waiting for the introduction of vaccine, which may bring some feeling of safety in people. However, the economic impact may continue longer. In India, the first quarter of current fiscal, we have seen 24% reduction in GDP, which in second quarter is reported to be 7.5%. At the end of the year, the contraction of GDP could be 9% as per the forecast. Government is trying to help individuals and industries to sustain. Lending to industries, traders have been facilitated. While increased lending will help sustain industries, will it lead to increased NPAs? Industries who lost market opportunities in domestic as well as international market, will they be able to get back their position? Questions like these are bothering all of us. And therefore, we could not think of a speaker better than Mr. Kamath, who understands the pulse of the Indian economy. And he has chosen a right topic to speak: the Indian economy, recover and recreate. He will be formally introduced by our chairman in a few minutes. In the meantime, I want to thank all those individuals and organizations who have supported the activities of the trust for the last 26 years. All trustees are working on voluntary basis, devoting their time and contributing their experience. I request all professionals, policymakers, and industries to continue supporting the activities in the time to come. I can promise on behalf of the trust that we shall put our best efforts to facilitate interaction between different stakeholders related to economic, scientific, and technological developments, which in turn will be beneficial in our nation building. Initially, we were hesitant to organize this lecture online, but then looking at the experience of different organizations, trustees recommended to organize it online. And so we are able to connect today. The speaker is normally willing to take a few questions after his talk. Persons who have questions are requested to put their questions in the chat box. Speaker will answer them at the end. The proceedings of today's lecture are being recorded, and the same will be available later, for which the link will be provided. Please keep your systems on mute so that there is no noise, background noise disturbance while we are listening to the speaker. And I now request our chairman, Mr. Trivedi, to say a few words and introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shyam. It's my great pleasure to talk about Mr. Kamath. Honestly speaking, he doesn't need any introduction. He is such a well-known figure in the financial world and in the business world that whatever I say may be superfluous. But for the sake of form, I would like to make my introduction. Mr. Kamath, as Shyam mentioned, was born in Karnataka. He has had studied in the IIM Ahmedabad, and after working for ICICI in the initial years, he went on to Manila with the Asian Development Bank, and there he worked in various countries, including Bangladesh, Indonesia, and in India as well. Later, he joined ICICI as its chairman and was instrumental in making huge changes as the bank expanded enormously. I recall those days I used to be in the Ministry of Finance, and I recall his huge contribution in that area. He has been given a number of awards. Padma Bhushan, of course, was given in 2008, but he has been honored a number of times by industrial houses, by Economic Times, by Forbes magazine, and by a number of other magazines and industry organizations. He is a doyen amongst the financial experts, and I have great pleasure in now requesting him to kindly deliver his lecture on Indian economy, recover and recreate, which is very topical for the present time. Mr. Kamath.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi. Good evening to all of you. Mr. Chaturvedi, trustees of the Lovraj Kumar Memorial Foundation, I'm honored and delighted to be with you to deliver this lecture. Indeed, Lovraj Kumar was one of a long list of distinguished technocrats who contributed immensely to our economic development. In particular, he was instrumental in the founding of the petrochemical industry in India. One can only imagine the challenges he faced and successfully overcame as a pioneer. Past speakers have spoken on a variety of issues which I believe have enriched the Lovraj Kumar Memorial Lecture series. I intend to cover a subject which is topical and I would dare say at the top of our minds, given what has been happening around us in the last few months. The COVID-19 pandemic that hit us early this year is a sudden shock for all countries around the world. Indeed, this pandemic has spread like wildfire, and the damage has not only been on the health front, but equally so on the economic front. While on the health front, there is a race to find a cure and a vaccine, on the economic front, we have had to discover new ways of doing business, including this lecture, which is being done in a virtual format. We have had to adjust to this new normal in the blink of an eye and reset our minds, revive, and recreate the economy. I will today speak on the topic, reset, revive, and recreate the Indian economy. Before I get into the topic of the day, let me talk about the environment that we were in when the pandemic hit us. Luckily, in the global context, there were several key positives. Oil and commodity prices were at historic lows, inflation was low, interest rates were at never before lows, there was unprecedented liquidity in the global markets, and importantly, we were in a digitized and connected world. I stress this last point, namely that we were in a digitized and connected world, because this has a lot to do with the later part of this lecture. When you look at the domestic context at the point of time the pandemic hit us, we had an economy which had several positives. We too had low interest rates, a sharply sloping interest rate curve, high liquidity, low commodity prices, strong currency flows, large corporates which had been deleveraged and competitive, and a banking system which had been newly cleaned up. We also had a large knowledge sector, cheap and available bandwidth, which is critical in these times, a workforce which was ready and able to work from home, an e-commerce sector, the foundations of which had been laid and ready to be scaled up at speed. We had the ability to drive both the digital and the physical quickly and in real time. We had our share of challenges, and some of them appear to be insurmountable. The challenge of migrants who wanted to take safe harbor by returning to their homes, an MSME sector which looked to be in urgent need of support, the need to ensure that agriculture production was not disrupted, reforms that were critical to provide need-based financial assistance to both corporate India and consumer India. The government took several steps to address these challenges. These have been covered in detail in the media, and I do not intend to dwell on these steps. Suffice to say, they provided the necessary, the support necessary to contain the economic damage. Challenges still remain and can only be addressed by rapid revival and continued handholding of people and sectors that will have been hardest hit. I now move to the themes that I want to address. I will first talk about resetting the mind. To me, this was critical if we were to conquer the challenges we faced. I remember, and I'm sure all of you do, the first few days when all supply chains seemed to have been disrupted and access to basic supplies to our own homes were at a standstill. The first lesson that I learned at that point in time was that the human spirit and endeavor can conquer challenges dramatically fast. It is almost as if you see the theory of constraints in front of you, and some hidden energy allows you to jump higher and higher to virtually do the impossible and scale the constraint in front of you. I saw this in front of my eyes as the ladies of the apartment complex that I live in learned to operate in a digital world, quickly scaling from using a telephone and WhatsApp to using Excel and Google Sheets to networking with suppliers at the farm level who also in real time jumped onto the digital platform. Needless to say, the ladies mastered UPI and digital payments. In a span of less than 2 weeks, we could see that supply chains had been set up by the ladies in our homes, some of whom were in their late 60s, whom we would never have thought would find it easy to adapt to this new normal. I then realized the power of the human mind to quickly reset itself in real time. I also realized that if we, at an individual level, could adapt so quickly, corporate India, the rest of India, would also rise to the occasion at speed. This reset of the mind happened in a blink. In the past, whenever there were changes, they happened slowly. Imagine the steam engine, how long it took for the benefits of that discovery to actually spread. Similarly, electricity, the computer, which all took a long time to evolve. Then came the internet era and Moore's law, when we first started seeing the power of computing accelerate at a non-linear pace. And then the digital era, when things started accelerating even faster. However, none of us were prepared for the pace at which we needed to change when the pandemic hit us. This in-a-blink disruption has touched everybody, from the housewife to the person on the street, to the corporate entity, and indeed to economies. And those who have shied away from embracing this change will unfortunately pay the cost. One key underlying feature of this reset has been what I call the digital embrace, which in turn has brought forth three key trends. First, a greater use of digital tools. Second, seeking productivity gains in every activity. And third, adoption of a new normal. In this new normal, digital mobility, e-learning, e-office, e-medicine, digital shopping, and so on become key. We as a nation are well placed to take advantage of this cycle given the robust digital backbone that has been built and the way in which we have brought down the cost of broadband access. I will now move to revive. Immediately after the announcement of the lockdown, it would be correct to say that all of India was in a despondent mood. I will not recount this in detail because all of us have experienced it firsthand. However, by early May, we could see that there were sectors which were performing significantly better than others. The agriculture sector in particular was firing on all cylinders and as was obvious from the fact that there was an uninterrupted supply of produce from the farm to the table. Similarly, early readings of high-frequency indicators gave us an insight into the recovery process underway. In particular, the fact that manufacturing India had started to produce for the market was heartening. This was pleasantly surprising because it was expected that SME supply chains would be facing enormous challenges. Obviously, the handholding that was provided by the government through various schemes that it had rolled out early on allowed SMEs to continue operations and be an important part of the supply chain. As we went into June, it was clear that manufacturing was making a comeback and industry leaders were of the view that production was getting back to 80 to 90% levels by the second quarter of the year. What has underpinned this recovery? Initial steps to provide a helping hand, be it at the subsistence level or through loan moratoria to both the retail consumer and corporate borrowers, went a long way in ensuring that the wheels kept on spinning. A robust agriculture season meant that rural India was not impacted as much as urban India. This was clear when we looked at the numbers for the first quarter and early numbers for the first month of the second quarter, where rural India appeared to have consumed significantly better than urban India. One key element in this process was the low interest rate regime that was in place throughout the period. This enabled a quick recovery, which was particularly visible in the infrastructure sector in rural India and in retail home sales across the country other than in urban centers. During the revive phase, a key element to rapidly drive the process forward is going to be money in the hands of consumers through availability of credit and low interest rates. If we keep the fear of inflation aside, and I am heartened by the comments of the Reserve Bank Governor today, low interest rates can have a magical impact on accelerating growth in an economy. I will give an example of how a concerted effort to bring down interest rates propelled the Indian economy to grow at rates which had never been seen before, and at the same time enabled opening up of an entirely new engine of growth, namely the retail consumer. I talk about the year 2001 or so, when Vijay Kelkar was the finance secretary, and he, working with other policy makers with considerable effort, managed to lower the cost of borrowing by half. This was done by working on bringing down the yield on a 10-year government bond from almost 11% to 5.5%, enabling systemic rates to drop sharply. Consequently, a mortgage which was costing about 14% fell to 7%, a car loan which was at around 18% fell to 9%, and so on. Needless to say, the cost of borrowing for corporate India also dropped sharply. This drop in the cost of borrowing for corporate India had a tonic effect on the massive restructuring that India was going through post the pain of the 1990s, particularly in the manufacturing sector. It also facilitated in a significant manner large infrastructure outlays that are rolled out by the then government. The results were spectacular and visible in a very short period of time. Retail credit started accelerating at year-on-year growth rates of upwards of 25%, and corporate India came back at full speed, and the massive infrastructure rollout handled and facilitated this growth. Indeed, the low interest rate regime allowed India to break the shackles of low growth rates and aspire for double-digit growth. I would posit that we are in a similar situation at this point in time and are positioned for rapid growth given the momentum that low interest rates provide and the digital super cycle which we are now riding. I now move to recreate. But before I start this part of my lecture, I would like to take a moment to summarize the second quarter results that have just been released. I will cover both corporate results as well as the economic numbers which have been released. Corporate numbers were a surprise to most people. However, if one were tracking Q1 performance and the month-on-month performance thereafter, these numbers should have been no surprise, as we saw steady improvement on all parameters. What is particularly noticeable in these numbers is that the top line of corporate India has broadly recovered to pre-COVID levels on a year-on-year basis. However, what is even more remarkable is the improvement in absolute EBITDA numbers and the margin that companies have been able to achieve. This indeed underscores the fact that productivity gains have been seen in the very first quarter as we come out of this the challenge that we have faced. Similarly, GDP numbers that have been just released are a positive surprise, coming in much better than the expectation of most people who track these numbers. Again, this would reflect that most parts of the economy are quickly back to pre-pandemic levels, and we are most likely to be in a V-shaped recovery. This provides us a good base to drive the process of growth, which will be the subject of this part of my talk. So what will drive growth in the future? If I look at the sequencing of growth that took place, and for this I will use the Chinese example, which I saw at first hand living there for 5 years. We see that that growth was sequenced by first addressing agriculture and animal husbandry, then a massive and continuing infrastructure rollout, the entire manufacturing push thereafter, and finally growth in the services sector. To this, add the recent digital push to provide what I call a rural-urban digital connect. When I look at India, there is unending scope in all the areas that I outlined. I would paraphrase this by saying, India by and large is yet to be built and should provide at a minimum a 25-year double-digit growth horizon for our country. We have a huge task before us to marshal our water resources, modernize and drive agriculture and animal husbandry. In this process lies the possibility to move value-added industries in the agro space to rural India. This will not only drive employment, but also prevent wastage and reduce the cost of transportation raw material. This will also enable us to modernize rural areas in parallel with modernization of the businesses in these areas. At the same time, we could work on creating the logistic chains and the digital connect which will link the rural production base to the urban kitchen. All this would drive not only economic momentum, but also vastly improve the lives and livelihood for our people in rural areas. On the infrastructure front, when I look at my experience over the last 5 years at the BRICS Bank, it is clear that we would not be wrong to say that on this count, we as India are yet to be built. We have enough work to do in providing housing for all, expanding and modernizing health and education, rebuilding urban India, connecting India, be it through vastly improved road networks, rail networks, introduction of high-speed railways, the creation of new ports, expansion of existing ports, providing modern transportation systems within urban India, improving our airports, improving our power supply, and in particular, making India clean and green. I purposely sketched out a laundry list just to reinforce the point that in short, the 25-year opportunity that I mentioned earlier is there right in front of us. While we are doing all this, in parallel lies the task to prepare ourselves for the digital super cycle by laying the foundation of a digital India. As I look at the manufacturing sector, we are in an exciting phase. The pandemic has taught us that there are several layers of efficiency which we could explore. We have learned to do more with less, doing it more efficiently, in a better way, and providing value for money in the truest sense. This is amply evident when you look at the way manufacturing in India has been able to operate within severe constraints, which but for the reset of the mind that took place would not have been feasible. Take, for example, the enormous constraint under which manufacturing India operated as the pandemic raged in its early days. They had to make do with employees whose health was a primary concern and work with a significantly lower number of employees on the shop floor. All these meant that manufacturing India learned to extract efficiencies and productivity gains in everything that they did. Clearly, other parts of the economy will leverage these learnings into their future operations and prosper from it. The fourth driver is going to be possibly the most exciting of all. I'm talking of what conventionally was called the services sector. Possibly this area will transform the most. The learnings from this sector and what is possible are already visible, be it in e-learning, e-health, work from home in the areas of information technology, banking and financial services sectors, and indeed parts of government. These should grow at a rapid pace as the learnings from operating during this period of crisis are internalized, analyzed, and scaled across. The digital supercycle will encompass all the areas that I mentioned above. The progress of the digital supercycle will be driven by vast advancements already seen in areas of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and further acceleration and development in these areas. In the area of artificial intelligence, the rate of progress is vastly superior to what we saw under Moore's law, which I mentioned earlier. The price performance of artificial intelligence is currently doubling in around 3.4 months. This would mean a tenfold or so increase in the price performance on an annual basis. We are boarding this super cycle at a time which is opportune and affordable for a country at our stage of development. To understand this, you only have to see the cost of access in India. Broadband cost in our country is the lowest anywhere in the world. This gives everybody, be it a person in the village or a person in urban India, equal access to the benefits of the super cycle. In India, the digital super cycle will grow by also leveraging the vast pool of technology workers who can be redeployed for this effort. We will most likely now see products and applications and indeed platforms that will originate in India and for use in India and for the world. We will also see a vast number of startups in these areas. The first flush of startups is already visible, but we are going to see a flood of these happen. It would be right to say that the digital supercycle will be driven by what I would like to call Startup India. These would be firms which are fully capable of leveraging the learning from technology into a vast array of business applications. Are there going to be any losers in this? Indeed, any business in any area of operations which is not capable of resetting its mind, adapting to the new normal, and leveraging learnings at a never before pace will be under challenge. In a way, it is going to be a David and Goliath story. The small but nimble and agile challenger able to build scale and capability and mount a challenge is going to be the winner in this race. We have so far looked at early advances in the digital supercycle using the word fintech. The phrase fintech. My belief is that fintech is going to be just a small part of the supercycle which will encompass almost every area of life. I started by charting a three-step process, namely reset, revive, and recreate. As I look back at the last 9 months post the pandemic, I find that by and large, we have achieved the first goal, namely reset of our minds. The second goal of revive, we have made considerable progress. There are things we still need to do, as is evident from the Q2 numbers, but these do not seem to be difficult to achieve. As regards the recreate part of what we have to do, we are on an exciting journey. We have to rebuild these businesses, those businesses which are still suffering from the impact of the past 9 months. Simultaneously, we can look at what the future lays out before us. This includes the vast arrays of tasks to build India. As I said, an unending task which could keep us busy for the next 25 years. We will be held in this effort by the global backdrop, which is benign, our external account, which is in surplus, and a low interest rate scenario where at this point in time, the entire T-bill yield curve is below policy rates. We are also in a period of ample liquidity, both global and local. The global liquidity allows us to scale up our FDI significantly. And if we have to resort to overseas borrowings for any of our activities in the manufacturing sector or otherwise, interest rates that are at never before lows. And having reset our minds, we should be ready to drive the recreate process forward. At the same time, we have this even more exciting opportunity to leverage the digital supercycle. If we work together with dedication, concentration, and effort, we should be able to achieve our aspirational growth of double digits for a very long period of time. This would enable us to achieve what I would like to again think of as an aspirational number, that is a $10 trillion economy over the next 10 years. I truly believe this is feasible, and what is required is for all of us to align ourselves and set out to make it happen. While we do all this, we need to remember that there is still a degree of pain in the system, and those who need a helping hand, be it at the individual level or at the corporate level, continue to get the support that they need. As I come to the conclusion of my talk, let me dwell on this mantra called Atmanirbharata. To me, the pandemic has taught that it is imperative that we adopt this mantra at an individual and at a corporate level. I am sure all of you, and indeed corporate India, has adopted this mantra. We would all need to persevere, have purpose, create our own opportunities, be ready to reset our minds and ourselves again and again, work harder than ever before, and most importantly, set no limits for tomorrow on this journey to Atmanirbharata. Again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of these thoughts. I must confess that these thoughts will evolve as they have evolved over the last 6 months. And I have seen, with I'd say happiness, that they have evolved in a very positive way. I do hope that my thoughts evolve in a positive way in the coming years, coming months, and indeed all of this also then results in an India that we can all be proud of, which will stand on its own feet and again scale the heights we aspire for. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kamath, for a very nice and comprehensive lecture where you have really covered a whole lot of issues. There are a number of comments from various people in the chat box. And I would request the secretary to kindly select at least 3 of them so that Mr. Kamath can answer these. So Shyam, can you please pose these questions?
There is a question. It says, in India, considering the borrowing cost as comparison to the rest of the world, the cost of borrowing, cost of energy, cost of infrastructure, keeping these aspects in mind, how many years you think that we would come on par with the rest of the world to be competitive? So that's the burden on the product that you make in India, and how many years you think the producers in India will be competitive in the world?
First, firstly, I would think that the cost of funding has gone down. My belief is that we will be in a benign, I would say, interest rate scenario for quite some time. Underlying this is what is underlying this is the global scenario. I do not see that picking up. Secondly, I think we also need to learn from others that if our country aspires for growth of the magnitude that we are looking at, then low interest rates become an imperative. And I think we are now learning to live with low interest rates. Again, I'm not sure whether people had an opportunity today to listen to the governor. He basically said the inflation numbers are what they are. He believes that we can live with this interest rate climate for quite some time. I think that is heartening because that probably will signal to industry that they could look at interest rates which are which will make them competitive. On the the power cost front, again, the changes that are happening, particularly green power, which is coming in at significantly lower cost, will make us competitive. But to me, the key driver in terms of becoming competitive, which you will see, I would think by next quarter clearly, it is obvious this second quarter, is the productivity gain that has happened. The productivity gain is going to be far greater than what we will see as gains because of on account of lower interest rates and on account of lower power tariffs. One other interesting point here, if you look at the large Indian corporates, now they then become like what I call bellwethers to the other companies. They are almost completely deleveraged as compared to what they were 10 years back or 20 years back, which would mean they are now using equity and their own cash generation to fund expansion rather than, as in the past, always use borrowed capital and leverage themselves 3 times, 4 times. The leverage now is hardly 0.5 or none in several companies. So all this will make Indian industry much more competitive. I believe they are already competitive. They will become even more competitive consequent to this.
The next question is from the individual's point of view. On one side, the industry looks for the lowering interest rates, but some of the individuals who depend on the income on their deposits with the bank and the interest, especially people who have retired, because we do not have any other social security model in the country. And these people do not have any lobbying group also with the government to get any benefits from the government. So do you think it is clash of interest of the society when you lower down the interest versus the industry versus the individuals?
This has been a challenge for us for a very long period of time. And the answer here is very clearly, make sure that inflation is at a level where your real interest rates are positive. So we will have to work on positive interest rates, which itself puts a constraint on the policymakers as to how much they can reduce interest rates. Nevertheless, I think probably the question is coming from a different side. That is, even today interest rates have gone to a level where somebody who is a retiree who is relying on bank deposits would find it a challenge. I would think that this is again something that has to be thought out at a central level. Are there any other ways in which we can provide support to classes of people who are impacted? I'm sure the government will think about this as we go along.
The another question we have from a gentleman there is, do you have any advice for the industry who are in the solar energy business, especially the cost of funds for the working capital, as you know, the new projects which are coming in the solar energy sector, the power tariff has been going down. And if the industry is finding it difficult to sustain, do you have any advice for such industries, how they can manage?
I think that they are riding what I call an upcycle, because they are in this situation where at least the newer ones, where the cost of setting up the facility is a fraction of what it was 5 years back. So this question that really is going to be bothering older installed plants, and indeed it is going to impact plants in the thermal sector. Whereas the newer entrants will, I think, have a much easier time. This is again something which will have to be thought through, because there is capacity there which was installed, let us say, just 5 years, 7 years back, which will face challenges in terms of how it competes with the newer plants. These are all, I would think, part of a growth curve, and we will need to address this as we go along.
Can you elaborate a little more on the rural sector? You emphasize that the improvement in the rural sector can certainly support the growth in the country. Can you elaborate a little more, considering the disorganized, the disconnected sector that we have there in the rural and agriculture sector?
Thank you. I thought that that was so when till the pandemic hit us. But when the pandemic hit us, and the way the rural sector was able to connect to urban India and keep the wheels going, as it were, and provide the momentum for growth, I think taught me something different. There are 2-3 parts to this. I think one is agriculture production, and second is evacuating that agriculture production and getting it to the table, as it were. So this is not only grains, I'm talking of all produce that we get from rural India. And I would think that the steps taken by the government to ease that process of getting product from the farm to the home is going to set up new opportunities in rural India. And these opportunities, again, as I see, are of completely different scope and magnitude than what we would have seen earlier. I'll give a small example. Again, I will pick a Chinese example. There's a company called Pinduoduo. Pinduoduo is a platform which is connecting the rural farmer or the rural market, the rural producing base, to the urban consumer. No middleman, it's a direct logistics supply, which means that whatever needs to be value added is value added at the rural place, most often by the producer himself, and then it comes to the table. And basically, the platform acts as a marketplace, disintermediating several steps, and in the process, cutting out costs, making the whole process much cheaper than what it is. I would think, and of course, this vehicle, again, I won't spend too much time, has scaled up dramatically in 5 years. I would think there are several such opportunities in India, and people, given the last 6 months' experience, are now comfortable operating in this environment. 6 months back, but for the pandemic, I would have believed that they would not have been. So I would think this puts the rural production base, and indeed the rural area, in a completely different context than the urban area. So I look at what is possible in the rural area with great optimism.
So Shyam, last 2 questions.
Well, just to elaborate on the same question, there's a question regarding the rural, because somehow these sectors are not integrated, the urban and the rural. The urban industrial sector is mostly looking at rural as the market for their products. And the whole concept of management, the logistics, somehow the rural sector is, so when it becomes to practical implementation, we see an opportunity there, but all those talented people going and working and helping the rural sector, where is the trigger point there?
Yeah, the trigger point there is, I think there are three trigger points. First is awareness. There needed to be an awareness that things are possible at the rural end. I am not for a moment talking about taking large manufacturing companies from anywhere else in the country to rural India. I'm talking of things which are relevant in a rural production context. What is being produced there, what is being grown there, what is being processed there, setting up the value adding part of the business in those areas, and that is what is happening elsewhere in the world. Now, the awareness is coming out from also the fact that once you do this, you can ship directly from there to the market or to the table, depending on how you want to go about it. And facilitating this is the ease with which the consumer is today able to do business on a digital platform. The third part is there needed receptivity at the rural end to also operate in this digital environment. I think I clearly see this already starting to happen. So for us, the time is opportune. Will we actually scale it up to the extent the opportunity will allow us to do? I think time will tell. But I believe this will happen because now you will see people trying to look at different ways of doing business and trying to drive that option forward.
You being a banker yourself, and government is trying to help the industries by giving them flexibility on their borrowings, making more lending available, borrowing opportunities for the industries to sustain, borrowing for the traders, even the small traders. Do you think as a banker, this can lead to more NPAs in the coming years?
See, ultimately, the situation of NPAs is dependent on whether economic activity is viable or not. To me, that is a single underlying line. If in any area, whether it be at, and we can analyze three sectors here. One is the corporate sector, large or small. Then is the consumer, borrowing a retail loan, and then the trader. If we ensure that all three remain viable, then there is no need to fear NPAs. Now, if I look at one underlying in here is, if a borrower is conscious and responsible, then there should be no NPA. Let us look at corporate India. Now, as I was saying, they by and large deleverage themselves compared to what it was 10 years back or 20 years back. So there is a learning there that too much debt is not good. And they are themselves now putting the check and balance on that. Even better example is the retail consumer. You look at the mindset of the retail consumer 10 years back or 15 years back when CIBIL did not exist, the score did not exist. Now that you know that you have a score to keep an eye on, I think the retail individual consumer is significantly more conscious of the borrowings he or she does and limits them so that the score is not impacted. I would think that consumers, as they are better informed, become more responsible. And I think we are coming to that situation where, by and large, but for severe economic shocks, we should not be fearing NPAs. Let me give one more example. If whatever I have heard about, the challenges of the last 6 months and the corporate India wanting handholding through moratoria, if what I heard is right, I think the shock there is significantly lower than what we had thought it would be when this whole crisis hit us. I think that indeed points to the resilience of the structure that we have built in corporate India. And I'm sure similarly, we are not seeing massive shocks in on the retail consumer side. Am I saying that there will be no NPAs? That is utopian. NPAs will always be there. There will be a class which will be in trouble for some reason or other. But equally, I think as long as we watch out for severe economic shocks, we should not have NPAs for other reasons.
Great. Thank you, Mr.
So,
Kamath.
Mr. Kamath, two questions which I wanted to
Please.
know from you. One, you mentioned about $10 trillion economy, but our current is about 2 trillion or slightly less than that. So when do you think that we would be able to, what's your assessment? At one point of time, we thought that this may be possible by around, say, 2030, 35. What is your current assessment? That's one. And second, can you please tell us about this BRICS Bank and how is it working in India and in what sectors?
Thank you. On the size and the scope, I would think that, see, these are aspirational numbers. And I have always believed in everything that I did at both the banks which I worked in, that you have to set an aspirational number, otherwise things don't happen. Whether it's in terms of goals or timelines or agility or whichever parameter that you want to look at, you need to set an aspirational goal. So to me, 10 trillion is an aspiration. I would think that if we can set this as an aspiration, say, over a 10-year period, thereafter, give or take a year, we try to hit it. I think that's the way I would look at it. The Prime Minister had set at this target of 5 trillion by 2024. I think they should still work on this target because I believe things will happen. And there are several constituents of this which will drive this. Again, maybe off by a year or two. I go back to a period in time when, this, Mr. Chaturvedi. In 4 years, we doubled our the size of the GDP. 2004 to 2008, we doubled our GDP from $500 million to a trillion, a billion, from $500 per capita to $1,000 per capita. We grew in 4 years. So things are possible, were possible then as we came out of a challenge. I think as we come out of this challenge, if we set our minds to it, it would be possible. So 10 to 12 years would be an aspiration that I would have. It should mean that I would like to see it, when I am still around to see it. That's the aspiration that I have in my mind. Regarding the BRICS Bank, it was a very interesting experience, Chaturvedi. You see, it was the first time that I had the experience of actually doing a garage startup. It was like a venture capital startup. The only difference was that there are 5 members here, and then 5 different cultures, 5 different, I would say, even government styles. I never imagined that we could have 5 different government styles, with South Africa closest to India, but others vastly different. So one had to learn this, and one needed to have a good diplomat by your side if you weren't one. So what I made sure was that I had a good diplomat from the Indian Foreign Service. I hunted for him, and I got him, and I made sure that I was, covered on that front. The rest of it was using the banking hat, as it were, and setting goals. So we set ambitious goals. In this, the very first meeting of the BRICS summit that I attended, this was in Russia before we were operational. Our Prime Minister set a very interesting thought in my mind. He says, why don't you look at being a green bank? Why don't you do green lending? So we owned that concept and tried to do as much as possible on the green front. So going on then in terms of lending, we said that we have to scale up very quickly. And we, again, set fairly aggressive targets. And by this year, we would have done 25 billion of lending. Probably it took peer institutions we had set up 60, 70 years back, probably 20 years or 25 years to reach there. We will do it in about 5 years. India has been always getting a good share of the bank's loans for a purpose, for a reason. And the reason is that I would say that our projects are very well prepared. And I must share this with those of you who are in government. It made me enormously proud when I saw how well our system works. That is, projects are generated. These are basically government guaranteed projects. So they originate in the states, and then they come to the DEA, and there they are in a way allocated to various development banks. So projects came out our way, well prepared, well sequenced, and very clear. It's not like that in other countries. So to me, it was a great sense of pride that India could generate these projects and put them on the table so quickly. So as a consequence, India had the lion's share of the loans in the first few years. So we were at around 35 or 40% because we were trying to build up scale. But I very clearly said that as we go along, we will grow the others also because we don't want that to be a discordant note. So I think by this year, India will be still not just 20%, but probably between 20 and 30%. And by the next 2 years, I think each of the founding members should be around 20% of the total book. Our areas have been vast. We have done a lot in terms of roads, rebuilding roads, the Rajasthan Water Canal, the entire relining of that canal, bridges. One of the bridges in Assam is an NDB bridge that we are now looking at, which we finance. And so a wide variety of projects across areas, primarily in the government area. In India, we have concentrated because we had all these projects which are so well conceived and scoped. We could go on with the government projects, but in other countries, we have to mix the government projects or supplement them with the private sector projects also. But in India, I think the bank is now ready to look at private sector projects going forward. But the government side, we had great support and a very good portfolio, which allowed us to scale up and scope up very quickly. So the other key point that I want to just end in the context of NDBs, I think we proved a very simple point that countries of the South can stand on their own feet. What is this? How do I let me explain this. Of the 5 countries, only China is a country which has an A in its credit rating. It's an A minus. All the others are BBB or below. And I think if I'm not mistaken, 1 or 2 of them virtually at the border.
You mean Russia?
Our collective credit rating is just about BBB or BBB minus.
Even Russia?
No, our rating.
I said even Russia?
Russia is just about BBB.
Oh, I see.
But if you look at South Africa and Brazil, they were of a lower rating.
Yeah, that's right.
So the 5 of us collectively BBB or BBB minus, depending on which rating agency. But we, as the NDB, born out of these 5 countries, at a BB plus rating. So a simple message that countries of the South can come together, put in money in what I would call a cooperative way, get a rating if you are properly governed and you are responsible, of a very high order. The difference between a AAA and a AA plus in borrowing cost is not even 0.25%. It really is not meaningful in terms of what it would ultimately cost a country. And in our case, what we did was that extra 0.25% that, let us say, we were paying for our borrowing, we more than made up by being lean. So for example, the model that we have set, we believe we can run this bank with just 500 people. The original thought, looking at what was the precedent, the working group which set up this bank had thought we would need about 2,500 people to run this bank. But the 10-year projection that we did, my best estimate was we will not cross 500 people. After 5 years, we have 200 people. So in 10 years, I don't think we will cross 500 people. Of course, the hosts were very generous as a lighter moment because they committed that they will provide an office and a building to seat 2,500 people. They have stood by their word. The building is committed, and now the bank will need to think what does it do with the 2,000 seats which are there in the building. So that's the note. But we could squeeze that efficiency, and that efficiency has meant that we save the 0.25% that is the higher interest rate cost. So we lend at the same rate as any other institution to our borrowers. Thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi, for giving this opportunity.
Thanks a lot. So I extend a very warm words of thanks to Mr. Kamath, and may I request Shyam to kindly formally thank Mr. Kamath.
Can I invite Professor Anil Sarwat, Chairman of the Northern Regional Center, Indians of Chemical Engineers, to propose the vote of thanks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good evening to everybody. Padma Bhushan Shri K.V. Kamath, President New Development Bank and former Chairman ICICI Bank, respected Shri B.K. Chaturvedi ji, Chairman Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, Shri Shambang ji, Secretary Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, trustees of the Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, members of Executive Committee, the Institute of Chemical Engineers, Northern Regional Center, our most valued invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers, Northern Regional Center, and on my own behalf, I thank Shri K.V. Kamath, who despite his busy schedule has found time to grace the occasion and share his thought with us today. Sir, we are grateful to you for accepting our request to deliver the 27th Lovraj Kumar Memorial Lecture and enlighten us. The topic of today's lecture, that is Indian economy recover and recreate, is quite relevant to today's scenario, as the global economy has suffered immensely due to this pandemic and is currently on the path of recovery. Sir, you rightly said that the pandemic has resulted in resetting of the human minds. And as I come from academia, I will share just one of the example which we are conducting, that all the classes, tutorials, exams, and in quiz, they are being conducted online in this current semester, and it is expected to be in the next semester also. All the international and national conferences, seminars, meetings, and even the selection committees, they are being organized in virtual mode, and the cost incurred on traveling, visa fees, accommodation, which were quite significant, they have been reduced significantly, and moreover, the participants, they are finding it convenient to attend these meetings, conferences, and selection committees on the virtual mode. So it is expected that in future, most of these conferences, seminars, and meetings, they will be conducted in the online mode only, as it will reduce significantly much of the expenditure which was incurred earlier on traveling and accommodation and all these. Sir, we have been enlightened by your thoughts today, and moving further, thanks to the other distinguished invitees too for accepting our invitation and gracing the occasion. Many thanks to the sponsors also for supporting the event. Well, ladies and gentlemen, at the home front, I would also like to thank the team of dedicated colleagues of Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, ICICI Northern Regional Center, and FIPI, that is Federation of Indian Petroleum Industry, for extending all the help in conducting this event. Sir, we thank the members of media for evincing interest in covering the event. Finally, thank you all for sparing your valuable time by attending this function and making it a success. Thanks you all. Bye-bye and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Trivedi. Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
So thank you. Hope to
Thank you,
see
sir.
you in
Thank you.
in
Bye-bye.
the coming days when you come to Delhi.
I will certainly meet up with you. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Mathur Saab, thanks a lot for your
Nice, sir.
support.
Welcome. Come on, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to host it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.